Sugar and Spikes is a science-backed and semi-sarcastic mental health podcast for a new type of business leader. Mental health concerns are occasionally addressed, but this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any condition, mental, physical, metaphysical, or otherwise. That's a job for your doctor or therapist, not a podcast. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
Back.
Yay!
Welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast.
Welcome.
I'm Dez.
I'm Tammy. We're just going with that now.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you don't know who we are, you can go to the website and figure it out. No, but I am a serial content creator. I make the things.
And I'm a licensed psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I help fix feelings.
Yep. And today we wanted to talk about, taking on projects at work or starting projects in your own business or something that really make you feel terrified
Mm-hmm.
and anxious.
Even if they're like a big passion project for you, like you have very strong feelings towards it, you can still be like, oh, these stakes are really high.
And kind of like how to navigate that, because I think we all come up to those throughout our career.
Of course.
And if you don't, then maybe it's time to find another career.
Maybe.
That's another topic for another episode.
Yeah.
So this was brought about because of, as most of our episodes are, stuff going on in one of our lives. So Tammy, give us general backstory.
So I was asked to come speak to provide some basic FAQ, basic educational knowledge about something, and I don't know, it just sounds pretty high stakes to me, and I've been feeling pretty angsty about it, even though I understand that some of my thoughts are not reasonable, and yet I'm still having them.
Yeah, well, it should be noted, it's a polarizing topic.
It is a polarizing topic. And I'm trying to figure out how to kind of bridge that gap from one side to the other to kind of create some understanding and maybe tone down some emotions a bit. Only I have really strong emotions about it too. So I can align with people in that way. They have strong feelings. Well, I have strong feelings. So,
and strong feelings in the I'm right. Both people on either side have the
and I'm
cool,
right,
but my way is right.
Right.
And those are the things that are really hard to even create some sort of discussion. Not to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But I wanted to bring this up because it's a little twofold. So in terms of the topic and the split side piece, I thought it would be good because we always talk about living in the gray, but also there are times where you vehemently feel you're on the right
side of something. Yeah.
And then the other thing is all throughout the podcast we talk about, managing and navigating the things that don't feel great. And I think that this is just such a clear example, because we were talking before we started recording, and Tammy was saying, I know some of these thoughts are unreasonable and everything. I'm except they're kind of not.
Yeah.
Not to be the bearer of bad news or the downer. I feel like I should be the one that's building you up and being it's going to be great. And just yeah, maybe a shit show.
It may be. Literally, it may be. And I'm trying to be, I'm trying to take a step back and be there has to be a way I can connect with people who are not coming along with me on this journey, but that's a really hard ask for me. I haven't necessarily done it super great in the past. But I'm really trying. But I also feel like I have a lot of pressure on me to like really do a good job. And I have 30 minutes. And there's so many things you could cover.
Yeah.
So how do you pick the things that go into the 30 minutes? And then once you get there and you're doing the presentation, what if you realize these were the wrong things? So, I mean, some of these are reasonable, some of them are not, but like I'm trying to navigate that. And I was telling you, like, I woke up this morning and I was really kind of out of it. And I was out of it last night. I fell asleep super early. And I'm like, and you're like, well, I bet it's the stress. Like, you haven't been under this kind of stress for a bit. So I wonder if that's what you're feeling. And I'm like, oh, yeah, definitely.
Because you've known about this presentation for how long now?
Maybe a week, maybe a week and a half, but not very long.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of good.
Well, yeah, but they had asked me to do it and they're like, I'm sure you already have a presentation. I'm like, I do, but it's an all day thing. So obviously that's not going to work.
Right.
So, and I'm having more trouble than I like. And I also thought this will be easy. Like, I'm pretty knowledgeable. Like, I can just pull things out of my other presentation, but it's not really coming down like that. And so I'm having to create this new one when I was expecting to just be able to kind of like cut and paste. And I told you, I think I'm like, I have one slide. And you're like, what? And I'm like, I have one. And I struggled to get to that one. So like, I think you're right about the stress. Just like, stress can be motivating, but it can also be like
debilitating.
Thank you.
I mean, and I think with content creation and everything, like, I've had that experience too.
Yeah.
Because I'm working on a project at work right now that feels a bit, I don't want to say high stakes because yours is significantly
It's okay
more,
for yours to be high stakes too.
but it feels very important, and like there's a lot of stuff that's like
riding on it.
Yeah. And there are some things, like some projects within the project where I've been working on it and I've just been like so stuck.
Right?
Because you want it to be right. You want it to be perfect, because I think we come up with stories around, if it's done right, then here's how everything changes.
Yeah.
And if it's done wrong, then here's how everything changes.
Right. I'm like, and I know for myself, I definitely have that. I'm like, if I'm not going to be able to change hearts and minds, then I basically just failed. And I don't know that that's actually true, because you aren't going to change hearts and minds in 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and it's not as cut and dry. You know, it's not that specifically, that outcome is not nearly as black and white.
Right.
You know,
because even I told you, I'm like, I just want to say, like, this is a really big topic. And so I'm just trying to really get the conversation started and kind of present some alternative perspectives to help kind of bring understanding on both sides. And you're like, but that isn't like you failing. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely like,
well, I think it's understanding what we think our expectations are, or what, like, identifying what we've labeled as expectations in terms of like, a win is this and a loss is this.
Yeah.
And navigating all of the possible options in between. So then when something happens that wasn't either the best or the worst, you're not in that initial level of shock, but in the, okay, so it's kind of like this, you know, and can begin to kind of process forward.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just anxious. I want to make sure I do a good job. I'm not the most amazing public speaker. Because even when I'm super knowledgeable and I can talk one-on-one, somehow I lose that ability when I'm like standing up there. Even though it's stuff I could talk about.
Yeah.
But now I have it on a PowerPoint and like, I'm like, oh, what if I go out of order? And, you know, all of that. Stupid stuff, like details.
Yeah. How have you been managing, or have you been managing the anxiety around the presentation, the project? like
I
kind
think
of up
by
till
avoiding
now.
it, because I haven't finished it yet.
Which is fair, you know, and I think we talk about avoidance a lot because it's the easiest thing to do, and when you're facing something that's so difficult, you're going to kind of like deflect to the easiest option.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it happens to the best of us because I did set aside and carved out some time to work on it. And I was texting you and I'm like, I literally have nothing. And you're like, what do you mean nothing? And I'm like, nothing. I literally have nothing. And I sent you the title. I'm like, I don't even like that. Like, yuck. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a good example of we want it to be right, just like you said, like quote unquote right, but we assume and our mind goes to there's one way to do that when there are many ways.
Yeah.
Because even if, like, let's say I get there and I do have to change course with the presentation, I can easily do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm educated. It's not like where I've just decided to like jump in and I'm kind of presenting what's on the slides and I can't really speak to anything outside of that. So I don't understand why, like, I'm kind of like, there's only one way.
I think there's also this idea of like the right content for the right person or people, you know, because if you do it in one way, then group A in the audience is going to be all about it, and it could anger group B. Whereas if you did it in another way, then group A may be like, that's mediocre, and then group B is just like, you know, just like more neutral.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a game of like best possible outcome.
Yeah, not
best outcome.
Yeah. So we're going to be working on that. We're going to be workshopping that later today.
And I think it's also a part of the process. Like, personally, I would be a little more surprised if you had things further along, like knowing your work style, and which is another reason why self-awareness around these types of things is so important.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be fine. Like, the presentation's going to be done.
Right.
You know, like, no one is concerned about, well, what if it doesn't happen? Like, it's happening. You know, and I think that that's another important thing to remember, because as you sit with like this anxiety and stuff, with work projects and everything, it's really easy to get caught up in that cycle of anxiety versus writing out the process.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and I really want to normalize avoidance and anxiety around big things.
Oh, yes.
Because that is one of the biggest parts.
And how you navigate that. For sure. I mean, I guess like you avoid it until you can't anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where I'm at, because it's coming soon.
Yeah, very soon.
Yeah.
And I think I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
But the other thing that I did think would be good to talk about, because you're kind of dealing with it and you mentioned it earlier, was the idea of public speaking. Because that's something, public speaking is crazy, because it's one of those things where in high school and in undergrad and in grad school, where teachers and professors would be like, we have you do presentations because you're going to need to do it in your job.
Right.
And I can't speak for you, but I know I definitely was sitting back completely smug, like, fuck that. No, it's not.
Right. Same.
And oh boy, was I wrong.
Super wrong.
Like, just so wrong.
Oh, me too. So wrong.
Kind of the wrongest I've been on a lot of things.
Mean we should have trusted our professors. Go figure.
Shocker.
I mean, I guess I never had the idea that I would be doing presentations in front of people who weren't clinicians.
That's fair.
Because, like, I didn't intend to teach. and working in mental health, you consider, okay, well, I would probably be presenting to other mental health professionals. And that has happened for sure. But this other piece is kind of like coming too.
Yeah.
And like, I think once I do this once, I may be asked to do it again. I hope I do a good enough job to be asked to do it again. So yeah, you know, and I'm not a good public speaker. I just freeze. I'm just suddenly I can't think of what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And like, I'm staring at the slides and I'm like, why am I staring at the slides? Like, I know what I'm doing. Why can't I do it?
Yeah.
I'm sure other people have experienced this too.
I talk really fast when I do public speaking, like obnoxiously fast. And sometimes if I go off script, I'll get really wordy.
Yep.
Like all of the superfluous language that I can think of
goes into that answer.
And like, so I don't work in academia or in like a clinical role.
Right.
So a lot of times like my language reverts back to academia.
Oh yeah.
And significantly longer words than I use 360 days out of the year.
Right, I know. It's like, stop. And as you're saying it, you're like, stop saying it. Stop saying it. And nope, you're just on the road. Yep.
And I mean, I think so. It's no secret that public speaking is one of the most common number one fears. And it's that like people give tips, and I think we'll cover like a couple maybe, but there's no singular way to kind of navigate it.
No.
And to your point, I mean, different audiences produce a different level of anxiety.
Right.
You know? So I think that's the first thing, which kind of connects to the idea of like knowing who you're talking to.
Yep.
Because like as someone that does presentations, and if you're getting ready to get up in front of a large group of people, knowing that piece is key, because it's like public speaking is really an awkward form of like a 20-minute to an hour long relationship.
Yeah.
You know, because even though the audience may not be talking back at you, sometimes they may, sometimes there's questions, there's still this two-way communication that happens.
Yeah.
You know, like you can tell if an audience is engaged, if they're checked out, if they're mad, like
for sure.
Anyone that's been on a stage can know that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to have to do it, and we're going to have to talk about it after and figure out what can go better next time, you know, because always things can go better.
Do the debrief.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It's consuming all my attention for sure.
Well, I know we started to do a bit of a deep dive into what does the audience look like, and what are these kind of common ground factors. And I know when I do presentations and stuff, like I always try to like neutralize the playing field a bit, or crack some sort of joke and take the stress away, even if only for me.
Yeah.
Because I've mentioned it before, like humor is one of my default defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
So I always open with like a really bad joke.
So I'm not funny. Anybody who knows this can attest to this.
You're funny.
No.
Funny looking.
But so that's not my strong suit. That's probably not what I'm going to open with. And I try to open, so I feel like I'm a compassionate person. So I want to open in a way where I'm like compassionate towards people who at least they showed up to listen. So, I mean, I guess there's that.
I think my goal, and what I've noticed with a lot of really good public speakers and where I kind of got the idea from, is like when you're speaking, it's the audience versus the person on the stage. And everyone that I've really respected as a public speaker has found a way to make it someone talking with other people, not the person on the stage.
Yeah.
And that's an art. But
not my art.
But I think if you can do that on any level, I think that takes away a lot of, or can take away a lot of the fear and nerves that you experience on the stage. Like if we want to talk kind of like anxiety reduction and stuff, like taking command and ownership of those very first moments can do a lot to make the situation feel better.
Yeah, that's true. So figuring out how that works for you, like you tell jokes, I don't know what.
Well, and what your audience is, right? Like there are definitely times where I won't tell a joke, but open in a very like lighthearted way.
Right.
Something like that. Like find a core strength or style and adapt it to the audience and situation that you're kind of like entering into.
Right. So we'll have to see how that goes. And we'll report back after.
I think the other thing in terms of public speaking is having a certain level of preparedness.
Yeah.
And I think what's hard that I've experienced is a lot of times I'll do public speaking for things where I really know it like the back of my hand. And when I think about practicing, I almost see no need.
Right.
Because I'm like, I know it so well.
Yeah.
But then I will say the times that I have actually practiced or just like tried to practice and like played with the words and getting the words out.
Yeah.
Those speaking times have gone significantly better. And my hypothesis is it almost comes down to maybe not necessarily muscle memory, but just your body like slipping into this. We've done something like this before.
That's true.
Versus this is all new and taking in the new situation, the lights, the new faces and everything, and trying to present something.
Yeah.
Like I think that
you're asking a lot of yourself.
Yeah, making it easier. And if that's by knowing that those thoughts have made it out of your mouth and those pathways have kind of been carved, that makes it easier on yourself.
For sure.
I
agree. So the few times that I have practiced, it did go significantly better because then I worked out like what worked, what didn't, like where I got stuck, how I moved forward from that. So, I mean, I'm definitely going to be practicing once I get the presentation ready.
And it's not like memorizing or anything. And I have to remind myself of that because I grew up in a school where it was very much memorization focused. And getting out of that and into the knowing kind of like the path and the gist of stuff and then going forward and leaving space for that natural flow. That's hard. And I've definitely gotten caught up in, but I mixed these two words up, so now I have to start again. And that's not what I'm talking about. That doesn't help and can actually make things worse, I think.
Yeah.
Because then there's added pressure on yourself to have it be exactly right. And that's not what public speaking is necessarily about. Not that I'm like a professional, but like in terms of like basic career level, presentations and things like that. It's much more I guess organic.
I mean, it can be. I don't think that memorizing it like a speech is necessarily helpful.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that's so hard for me is once I put down a PowerPoint, I struggle to stay on those tasks versus just be able to have a conversation. So I go back and forth between those things. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we'll have to see. I'll report back. I'll tell everybody. Just hoping for a good outcome. An effective outcome. Maybe.
Something where no names are called.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah. set the bar. Set the bar nice.
I don't get booed
Yep.
off the stage.
Let's see. Any final project anxiety tips or public speaking thoughts?
Well, it's like you said, like you're going to be nervous. It would almost be
Mhm.
strange if you weren't.
Mhm.
And figuring out how to get that down to a level that it motivates you rather than paralyzes you. So what I did is came over here and we're like bouncing some ideas off each other and kind of going through what might look the best. Since you know how I present, like I think it's easier to do that with somebody who knows you really well. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Like having someone else look over things and, be your audience of one as you go through the presentation can really be helpful. And I know we do that at work a lot where we bounce ideas, like we trade slides and people look at things and then it's walking through it and bouncing ideas off of each other for like, how should this work?
Yeah.
Getting that outside perspective, because especially if we're combining like public speaking with a true passion project, and if it's something that you care so much about, it's really easy to forget others' experiences and others' perceptions and their framework. And having someone else who's like, well, let's maybe tweak it like this, can help so much.
So much. So you need perspective. And I think you make a really good point when you're super close to the topic or even when the stakes are really high, you need someone else who's like, what if you did this? And even if you don't end up using that suggestion, it makes you think more deeply about what you are putting in and the content that you're covering.
Well, and there's more confidence, right? Because you've essentially been challenged.
Right.
So then if someone points that out in the audience, you stand behind what you're saying versus the classic, that's a good point, thanks for your feedback.
Yep, I'll have to think about that.
No one likes saying that.
Oh,
that's kind of the worst.
I know. And I have to remember that there's going to be other people there to answer and field questions too. Like it's not just me. So, and that there is support in the room. It probably won't feel like there is, but there will be for sure.
Well, and I think, like to the public speaking point, if anything helps people feel better, for the most part, I'm not going to pad this because of situations like yours.
Okay.
But for the most part, we do have to consider kind of the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Where 80% of the audience, either at the very least, is fine with what you're saying or actively want you to succeed. Like very few people
I think
general.
that might be reversed in my case.
Yeah, I think it's probably 60-40 or something.
Really? You think?
But like very few people are actively rooting for you to fail. Whereas even that 20% is, well, that wasn't great.
Yeah.
Like
nitpicking.
Yeah. Like things like that. And I think that our brains, again, going back to like, what does the outcome look like?
Yeah.
Our brains go to the people either love it or that was the worst thing ever.
Right.
And I honestly, I know I've seen some bad presentations, but thinking about all the presentations I've seen, I can think of the idea that I've seen 3 or 4 bad.
And even when they were bad, it didn't have to do with with the information being presented. It was more like presenting style.
Well, and like to that point, I can't remember what those were.
That's true.
I think a part of my brain is like, statistically, you've probably seen 3 or 4 bad ones, but we don't know what that is.
Right, because we just
can't
forget
remember
about them. Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a downer if it's something that you care a lot about and that you spend a lot of time. I know I have spent a ton of time working, like creating a good presentation, but the takeaway from that is if someone deems it as not great, it's quickly forgotten. Whereas if someone thinks it was really good, they're going to remember your name. They're going to remember like things about you. They're going to remember the presentation.
Right.
Yeah.
Is
that your experience too?
Yeah, for the most part. I think the hardest thing for me when people give presentations is when they read the slides, because I'm like, then why are you here? You could have just sent that.
Mm-hmm.
But having enough engaging content that people have to listen. So not putting too much on your slides.
Yeah.
So that they aren't reading the slide and trying to listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Which is an art.
Right. Because you have to have enough on the slide to, like, tell you where you're going, but you don't want to have too much on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll see.
I mean, it's trial and error with all the things. It's all just.
And I haven't done this presentation before. I've done similar ones, but not one like this. So, but once I have the 30 minutes and I have the presentation, then if I have to do it again, I pretty much have it done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. You really want to be done.
I know. I feel so bad. I'm like, okay, we're done.
Okay. Oh, yeah. We're done here. That's it for this week. It was a bit more directed, but that's how it be sometimes.
Right?
I hope there was something enlightening, because these are things that come up quite often. Let us know what you think. If you like it, leave a review, subscribe. If you didn't like it, share it with someone who may like it. And we will be back next week.
Bye, friends.
Bye.